News Channel 5 at 11.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Night Beat. I'm Jim Sackett.
And I'm Laurel Sauer. Thanks for joining us. Oh, we need to help Kurt out. That's going to be a huge bill on his credit card there. Well, tonight we take a journey home with News Channel 5's Iris Guzman.
This is where my house stood, where that construction site is.
Her father was born in Cuba and just weeks ago returned to the island nation. His moving story when the Night Beat returns.
He's in the Oval Office. The U.S. embargo against Cuba is back in the spotlight tonight because of election year politics.
Senator John Kerry says he wants to review the policy. President Bush supports a much tougher stand.
Earlier this month, News Channel 5's Iris Guzman spent a week on the island. She joins us now with a very personal story. Iris?
Growing up, I heard about Cuba all the time. My father was born there. He left when he was 15 years old and returned with his family this month for the first time in more than 4 decades. When we went back, something was missing.
35 minutes, that's all it takes to fly from Miami to Havana. It's a short flight into another world, the third world. Only 90 miles from the world's richest nation, Cuba is a country crumbling from more than 40 years of neglect and decay. At the gates of Havana's airport, Cubans wait impatiently for the few arriving flights. With each arrival, family and friends are reunited, at times after decades of separation. These two men were childhood friends who've not seen each other since the revolution that changed everything.
Castro overthrew Fulgencio Batista by military revolution.
Fidel Castro seized control of the government in 1959. 1 year later, with the help of the Catholic Church and the U.S. government, 14,000 Cuban children were slipped out of the country and scattered across the U.S. The exodus was dubbed Operation Peter Pan. My father was one of those children. At 15, he left his parents and everything he knew for a boarding school in New Jersey. It would be 10 years before he saw his parents again and 43 years before he returned home. At first glance, it appeared not much had changed. The beauty and charm of old Havana was still there. The cathedral and many of the mansions have, in recent years, been restored. The city was alive and vibrant. Music could be heard from around every corner. It wasn't until we went outside the tourist spots that another side of Cuba came into view.
Everything looks like hell. It's still a hell of a city, but everything looks awful.
Behind the faded facades of Havana's finest homes, it's not hard to imagine what once was.
Great architecture, which you can still see, but this now looks every third or fourth house is totally destroyed.
In our rented car, our family ventured into the Cuban countryside. We were struck by the beauty, but also by the poverty. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, Cuba lost its primary source of aid. The effects have been devastating throughout the island. Electricity is unreliable. The wiring resembles cobwebs. Running water is a luxury. People collect buckets for bathing. Food is heavily rationed. Unemployment is rampant. On a weekday in the city of Santi Espiritus, the streets were filled with seemingly idle people. My father grew up nearby in a small rural town called Encrucijada.
Without any sign, I can tell you that this is a road to Encrucijada.
By the time we reached the outskirts of Encrucijada, my father knew every turn from memory.
We're going to turn right and go over a bridge. There's going to be a movie house on my right.
It was hard to believe, but in 43 years, the town was virtually the same.
Oh, wow, they straightened out the curve.
As we rounded the corner to my father's home, there was something missing. His home.
This is where my house stood, where that construction site is.
Coincidentally, 15 days before our arrival, the Cuban government tore down my father's home to make way for a school.
Everything else is the same. It's kind of ironic that the one thing that has changed is that. And really, I had never thought I would come back. So to me, it's a little bit of a shock that I'm here.
Around the block, though, still standing was my father's first home, a small row house where he was born and where he lived until he was 6. The same swing was still on the porch. The family who now lives there welcomed us in with open arms and showed my father around. Outside, a neighbor told my father his nanny, Nika, still lived in Encrucijada. My father set out to find her. She wasn't home, but was located with a quick phone call. Nika arrived within minutes. She had not seen my father since he was a teenager. Now she met his grown sons. Nika explained she was shocked when she found out my father was in town. At first, she thought it was a joke. Nika took my father to visit another family, good friends of my grandparents. Gathered in their living room, the family shared stories of how life has changed. My father later admitted the visit was emotionally overwhelming.
It is very taxing to go in there and to see the needs of the people, what they're going through, how difficult their lives is.
My father was worn down by what he saw.
Among other things, you feel utterly powerless to help them. You cannot help a whole country.
Our journey ended after 6 days. It will likely be my father's last visit to Cuba.
If I have to go, it's because I have to go for family reasons, but I would not be going there as a tourist.
At the airport, we found the same scene as we had a week earlier, this time in reverse. Cubans separated once again from their family and friends. My father knew he could have easily been one of the ones left behind.
You can only think, but by the grace of God, that could be my problem.
It was extremely difficult to shoot video in Cuba. There are only certain images that the Cuban government wants shown. We strayed outside the tourist areas, and on our second day, I was arrested and detained for several hours at a police station outside of Havana, all because I shot video of a police officer on duty. I was eventually let go as long as I erased the tape, but it was certainly a scary experience.
I'll say, especially in Cuba as it is today. You never know what's going to happen to you. You did a great job. It was such a personal inside look at the way Cuba is today. It's frozen in time. They all say that.
You know, and after years of growing up and hearing about it, it was really something to go there and experience that. Just so incredibly sad.
What was your impression of your dad's impressions?
You know, I think as you saw from that piece, my father's not really an emotional guy, but I think he was really struck by that. And I think the overwhelming sadness of the situation is really what struck us all.
To go back and see so many years that just such disrepair and they were not making any progress there.
And
it's so
just
sad.
to see so many people still suffering.
Still struggling, yeah, too. But it was
Iris
a great,
Guzman, thank you.
great look inside. Thank you, Iris.
Let's move over to weather now. And Steve, we're in the middle of the week, and it looks like we are in for some nice weather through the weekend.
We've got nice weather.